It's day 6 of thinking about Anne Boleyn, and as promised, we're going to talk about her years in the European courts. So Anne spent almost 9 years in 2 different courts in Europe, in the Habsburg court and then more famously in the French court. So Margaret of Austria is ruling the Low Countries at this point as a regent in the place of her 13-year-old nephew, and she gets on very well with Thomas Boleyn, and he manages to secure a spot for his daughter Anne in her court to learn from her, essentially. Now, as I said yesterday, what we can't be 100% sure on is she there as a young teen maid of honour, or is she there as a 7-year-old child to learn amongst the nephews and nieces, amongst the royal family, and to get an education there? Ultimately, she's there for 2 reasons. One, to learn French, because Thomas hopes that this will then make her invaluable as a member of Catherine of Aragon's household when she comes back. That's his ambition for her at this point. Come home, speak excellent French, and be useful to Catherine. But this court is also, at this point, the height of aristocracy and good manners. Henry VIII himself has sent 2 of his favourite courtiers there to kind of learn how things should be done properly. Anne writes a letter home to her father, to sort of in French, to show how she's getting on. The French is quite messy, but she makes very clear in this letter that she knows exactly why she's there and that she's working hard. And Margaret herself writes to Thomas and says how pleasant this girl is for her young age. And Margaret is a meticulous chaperone, so no funny business going on under her watch. She does then, however, somehow make it to the French court. As the story goes, Mary, Henry's sister Mary, is coming over to France to marry Louis XII. And obviously that doesn't last very long. And the story goes that Anne goes over there to be part of her retinue, but when Mary goes back home with Charles Brandon, Anne stays in the court and becomes a member of the new Queen's household, Claude. However, there's no direct mention of her in that first part when Mary's come to marry Louis. And there's only one Boleyn mentioned, so we don't know for sure if they're referring to Mary Boleyn, who was there with Mary Tudor, or if they're referring to Anne, or if actually someone just didn't realise there were 2 Boleyn women there at all. So we don't know if she actually definitely went over there at that point when Mary was there. But we do know that eventually, once Mary Tudor's gone, and then we've got Francois I on the throne, he's married Claude, Queen Claude. Mary is part of her group of women. And something else to bear in mind, Claude at this point, Queen Claude, is 15 years old. If Anne Boleyn was born in 1501, that would make them, so that we are at sort of 1515 at this point, it would make them very similar in age, which could explain why she stayed so long and why Queen Claude seemed so keen on her. The translation aspect, actor's translator, probably also helped there. If she'd been born in 1507, by this point she would only be, around 8 years old. So that bit for me, I'm not quite so sure about. However, so for whatever age she was and for whatever reason, she stayed there for 7 years with Claude. During this time, she seemed to have really embraced French culture and very much became a French woman in her own right. She loved French poetry and music, embraced the French fashion. She's noted, even by Nicholas Sander, who didn't like her, she was very skilled with music, with dancing, with singing. She's noted that she plays the lute. There's also one reference that around this time, Leonardo da Vinci was receiving pension from the king. So it may be that she actually met Leonardo da Vinci. We don't know for sure, but there's a possibility, which is quite cool. Now, there were 2 key events that we're pretty sure Anne would have taken parts with. No prizes for guessing the second one, the Field of Cloth of Gold, because the whole Boleyn tribe seemed to have been there. But before that, we have a banquet at Bastille, 1518, and this was to mark the engagement of the Princess Mary Tudor. So Henry VIII's new daughter has been engaged to the Dauphin of France. So they're having a good old party to celebrate that. And it sounds like it was really wonderful. They had a canopy, navy, dark blue canopy, which showed the sort of the celestial map of the sky on it. And they dined at midnight, and the women served the food that time. So maybe Anne was one of the people handing out the food. And the next day that was all cleared away, and they had a big jousting tournament. Of course they did. And then in 1520, we had the Field of Cloth of Gold. Anne's name isn't listed, but she was probably there. Queen Claude, despite being 31 weeks pregnant, was resplendent in a gold and silver dress, and it said that the ladies were probably dressed to match them. So if Anne was there, she was probably dressed in silver and gold. Now, one other point to make about Anne's time at the court. It's often been suggested that maybe she was promiscuous in her time at the French court, and that she, learnt certain skills that she used to ensnare the king. It seems more likely that she learnt to be witty and to use her personality and to flirt in a kind of fun, jovial way, in a way that I think wasn't really taught as such at the English court. But there's no evidence that anything physical ever happened. But she certainly picked up some maybe cheeky mannerisms that I think didn't always that sometimes maybe got misconstrued when she was in the English court. So I'll see you tomorrow when we're going to think about her return to England and her relative little bit of peace before she starts getting heavily pursued by a certain king. See you then.